Picture this. It's 1983, Charlotte Motor Speedway, and Richard Petty's crew chief is about to pull off one of the most audacious cheating schemes in NASCAR history. While everyone else is obsessing over aerodynamics and engine modifications, this mechanic decides to do something so simple, so brazen, that when NASCAR finally catches on, they'll fine the team $35,000 and strip them of 104 championship points. The weapon of choice? 4 inches of rubber that shouldn't exist. This is the story of how one mechanic's illegal tire modification changed NASCAR forever, exposed the sport's biggest vulnerability, and proved that sometimes the simplest tricks are the most devastating. To understand why oversized tires were such a game changer, we need to travel back to NASCAR in the early 80s. This was the golden age of creative rule interpretation. Teams weren't just racing each other on Sunday, they were engaged in a constant technological arms race Monday through Saturday. The rulebook was more of a suggestion than scripture, and if you weren't cheating, you weren't trying. Richard Petty, the king himself, was already a living legend by 1983. 7 championships, 198 career wins, and a reputation as both a gentleman racer and a fierce competitor. But even kings need an edge, and in NASCAR, that edge often came from the garage, not the driver's seat. The crew chief and mechanics working on Petty's number 43 Pontiac understood something fundamental about oval racing that seems obvious now, but was revolutionary thinking at the time. On an oval track, you're constantly turning left. The car's weight transfers to the right side through corners, but the left side tires are doing something equally critical. They're maintaining the car's stability, controlling the rate of rotation, and determining how quickly the car can change direction. More grip on the left side doesn't just mean faster cornering, it means the entire physics equation of the car changes. Here's where the genius comes in. NASCAR had strict rules about tire specifications. Every team had to use the same Goodyear Eagles, mounted on 15-inch wheels, inflated to specific pressures, and most importantly, sized exactly to NASCAR's specifications. The sanctioning body would check tire compounds, tread patterns, even the date codes to ensure nobody was running special rubber, but they measured these things before the race, not during it. The mechanic's solution was breathtakingly simple. He didn't change the tire compound. He didn't alter the tread pattern. He didn't mess with exotic materials or secret formulas. He just made the left side tires bigger. 4 inches bigger in circumference, to be exact. Now, 4 inches might not sound like much. On a tire that's already about 87 inches in circumference, we're talking about less than a 5% increase. But in racing, where victories are measured in hundredths of seconds and positions are won and lost by inches, 4% is massive. It's the difference between qualifying 15th and qualifying 5th. It's the gap between running mid-pack and contending for wins. The technical execution was masterful. These weren't just stretched tires or overinflated standard tires that would be obvious to any inspector. These were specially manufactured tires that looked identical to legal tires in every way except their actual circumference. When mounted on the rim, inflated to proper pressure, and given a visual inspection, they appeared completely normal. You'd need to actually measure the rolling circumference to catch the difference, and nobody was doing that in 1983. Think about what those extra 4 inches actually meant on track. First, there's the contact patch. A larger tire, even slightly larger, puts more rubber on the asphalt. More rubber means more grip. More grip means higher cornering speeds. But that's just the beginning. The larger circumference also changed the effective gear ratio on the left side of the car. In essence, the left side tires were traveling slightly faster than the right side tires for the same number of revolutions. This created a natural tendency for the car to turn left, reducing the steering input needed from the driver and the load on the front tires. The car wanted to turn, making it more stable and predictable through corners. There was also an aerodynamic benefit. The slightly taller left side raised that side of the car just enough to alter the airflow underneath. In NASCAR, where ride height is strictly regulated, gaining even a fraction of an inch without detection is valuable. The raised left side improved the car's rake angle, reducing drag on the straightaways while maintaining downforce in the corners. But the real magic happened with heat management. Racing tires operate in a specific temperature window where they provide maximum grip. Too cold and they're slippery, too hot and they start to break down. The larger tires had more mass and more surface area, allowing them to absorb and dissipate heat more effectively. While other teams were struggling with tire degradation in the final stages of races, Petty's illegal rubber maintained its grip. The psychological advantage was equally powerful. Petty and his driver knew they had an edge, and that confidence translates to on-track performance. They could push harder in qualifying, knowing the tires would stick. They could be more aggressive in race traffic, trusting the extra grip to get them through tight situations. In racing, confidence is speed. For several races in 1983, the trick worked perfectly. Petty's team was competitive, consistently fast, and nobody suspected a thing. The car passed pre-race inspection, post-race inspection, and random checks throughout race weekends. NASCAR officials, other teams, nobody caught on. It was the perfect crime. But here's where things get interesting. The oversized tires weren't the only illegal modification on Petty's car. At the same time they were running the bigger left side rubber, they were also using another trick that would become equally infamous: illegal fuel additives hidden in hollow frame rails. The frame rail scheme was almost comically elaborate. The team had modified the car's roll cage and frame rails to create hidden compartments. These compartments were filled with special fuel additives that would slowly leak into the main fuel system during the race, effectively giving them race fuel with a higher octane rating than anyone else. Higher octane meant more aggressive ignition timing, which meant more horsepower. It was actually this fuel system modification that led to the discovery of the oversized tires. During a particularly thorough post-race inspection at Charlotte, NASCAR officials found evidence of the illegal fuel system. Once they started really tearing the car apart, they decided to check everything, including measurements nobody usually bothered with. That's when they discovered the left side tires were 4 inches too big in circumference. NASCAR's reaction was swift and brutal. The fine of $35,000 was massive for 1983, equivalent to about $100,000 today. But the points penalty was even worse. 104 points stripped from their championship total, essentially ending any chance at the title that year. It remains one of the harshest penalties in NASCAR history. The racing world exploded with controversy. Some saw it as justice finally catching up with a team that had been bending rules for years. Others argued that creative interpretation of the rules was part of NASCAR's DNA, and that Petty was being punished for being too successful at the game everyone was playing. Petty himself maintained a dignified silence initially, but years later admitted that his teams had always pushed the boundaries. "If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying hard enough," became an unofficial motto of NASCAR garages, though Petty himself was more diplomatic, saying his team was just being creative with the rules. The mechanic who masterminded the oversized tire trick became something of a legend in NASCAR garages. Here was someone who had outsmarted the entire sanctioning body with something so simple it was brilliant. No complex engineering, no exotic technology, just 4 inches of extra rubber applied with surgical precision. The immediate impact on NASCAR was profound. Within weeks, the sanctioning body implemented new inspection procedures specifically targeting tire measurements. They started measuring rolling circumference, not just tire dimensions. They began marking tires before races and checking those exact same tires afterward. They even started using templates and gauges designed specifically to catch oversized tires. But the bigger change was philosophical. NASCAR realized that teams would exploit any ambiguity, any gap in the inspection process. The rulebook got thicker, more specific, more detailed. What used to be gentlemen's agreements became ironclad regulations with specific penalties attached. Other teams, meanwhile, took different lessons from the scandal. If Petty's crew could run oversized tires for multiple races without detection, what else was possible? The incident triggered an arms race of creative cheating that would define NASCAR through the 1980s and beyond. Teams began investing more resources into finding loopholes, hiring engineers specifically to interpret rules creatively, and developing modifications that could pass inspection while providing competitive advantages. The technical evolution was fascinating. Teams started experimenting with tire pressures that would change during races as the tires heated up. They developed special valve stems that would release pressure at specific rates. They even experimented with tire compounds that would change characteristics as they wore down. None of these were as simple or effective as just making the tires bigger, but they showed how one simple trick had opened everyone's eyes to the possibilities. The oversized-tire incident also changed how teams approached vehicle dynamics. If 4 inches of tire circumference could make that much difference, what about weight distribution? What about suspension geometry? What about aerodynamic details that inspectors might overlook? Suddenly, every aspect of the car was fair game for creative interpretation. Engine builders took notice too. If Petty's team was willing to hide fuel additives and run oversized tires, maybe the engine itself had illegal modifications nobody had caught. Competitors started demanding more thorough engine inspections, leading to the current system where NASCAR randomly confiscates engines for complete teardowns. The safety implications were sobering. Oversized tires change a car's handling characteristics in ways that might not be predictable, especially if they fail. NASCAR had to consider not just competitive fairness, but driver safety. This led to more stringent tire testing protocols and requirements that teams use only NASCAR-approved tires with specific serial numbers. From a pure engineering perspective, the oversized tire trick was elegant in its simplicity. No modern electronics, no exotic materials, no complex calculations, just a basic understanding of physics and the audacity to act on it. The mechanic had identified a fundamental truth about oval racing and exploited it with minimal risk of mechanical failure. The grip improvement from those 4 extra inches was measurable and significant. Testing conducted after the scandal showed that the oversized left-side tires could improve cornering speeds by 2 to 3 miles per hour in optimal conditions. Over the course of a 500-mile race, that advantage could mean the difference between winning and finishing 10th. The heat management benefits were equally impressive. The larger tires could maintain their optimal operating temperature for 15 to 20% longer than standard tires. In the era before specialized tire compounds for different tracks, this was a massive advantage, especially on abrasive surfaces that chewed up tires. But perhaps the most impressive aspect was the detection avoidance. The mechanic had identified a blind spot in NASCAR's inspection process and exploited it perfectly. The tires looked right, felt right, and even measured right, unless you specifically checked rolling circumference. It was a masterclass in understanding not just the rules, but how the rules were enforced. The scandal also revealed the complex relationship between manufacturers, teams, and NASCAR. Goodyear, as the sole tire supplier, was caught in an awkward position. They claimed no knowledge of the special tires, but someone had to manufacture them. This led to new protocols about tire production, distribution, and tracking that persist today. The financial impact extended beyond the fines. Sponsors were not happy about being associated with cheating, even though privately many understood it was part of the game. Petty's team had to navigate delicate conversations with corporate partners about integrity versus competitiveness. It was a reminder that NASCAR was becoming big business, not just Saturday night entertainment. The media coverage was intense. This was 1983, before the internet, before 24-hour sports news cycles, but the story still dominated racing publications for months. Everyone wanted to know how it was done, who knew about it, and what else might be hidden in NASCAR garages. Fellow drivers had mixed reactions. Some were outraged that Petty had been cheating while they played by the rules. Others admired the creativity and wished their own teams had thought of it first. The incident reinforced the divide between drivers who saw themselves as pure racers and those who understood that NASCAR was as much about engineering and innovation as driving skill. The legacy of the Oversized-Tire scandal extends far beyond NASCAR. Other racing series took notice and tightened their own inspection procedures. The FIA, governing body of Formula One, specifically cited the Petty incident when implementing new tire regulations. Even drag racing and sports car series adjusted their rules to prevent similar exploits. In the decades since, the story has become NASCAR folklore. It's told in garages as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Young mechanics hear about it and dream of finding their own 4-inch advantage. Veteran crew chiefs reference it when explaining why certain rules exist. The technical documentation from the incident is now studied in motorsports engineering programs. How did they manufacture the tires? How did they maintain consistency? How did they coordinate the modification without leaks to other teams or officials? These are case studies in project management as much as engineering. Modern NASCAR would make such a trick impossible. Today's tires have radio frequency identification chips embedded in them. They're tracked from manufacture to mounting to disposal. Laser measurement systems can detect variations of less than a millimeter. The rolling circumference is checked multiple times during a race weekend. But the spirit of innovation that drove the oversized tire trick lives on. Teams now focus on areas that are harder to police. They work on computational fluid dynamics to find aerodynamic advantages. They develop proprietary simulation software to optimize setups. They push the boundaries in different ways, but they're still pushing. The human element of the story is often overlooked. The mechanic who developed this trick wasn't some villain trying to destroy NASCAR's integrity. He was a racer trying to win, using every tool at his disposal. In interviews years later, team members described the atmosphere as electric when they knew they had an advantage. Everyone worked harder, pushed further, believed more. The pressure must have been immense. Every inspection was a potential disaster. Every victory was tainted with the knowledge that it might be taken away. Every interaction with officials carried the risk of discovery. Living with that secret for multiple races took its toll on everyone involved. Richard Petty himself emerged from the scandal with his reputation largely intact. The King had won enough races legitimately that people could separate the team's actions from his legacy, but it added a layer of complexity to his story. He wasn't just a great driver, he was a competitor who understood that NASCAR success required more than talent behind the wheel. The technical specifications revealed during the investigation were fascinating. The left front tire was manufactured to be exactly 2 inches larger in circumference than standard. The left rear was also 2 inches larger. This symmetry maintained the car's balance while providing the cornering advantage. The right side tires were completely legal, which helped the car pass standard inspection procedures that focused on comparing left to right rather than measuring absolute dimensions. The tire pressure specifications were also modified. The oversized tires were designed to run at slightly lower pressures, which increased the contact patch even further. The team had developed specific pressure charts for different tracks, optimizing the setup for each venue's unique characteristics. The compound of the oversized tires was identical to standard tires, which was crucial for avoiding detection. Any difference in rubber hardness or composition would have been immediately obvious to inspectors or other teams. The genius was in changing only the dimension that nobody measured. The manufacturing process remained somewhat mysterious. Creating tires that were consistently 4 inches larger in circumference required either complicit suppliers or incredibly sophisticated in-house capabilities. The prevailing theory is that the team had connections within Goodyear's racing division, though this was never proven. The data acquisition from this era was primitive by today's standards, but the team kept detailed notes on the performance advantage. They documented tire temperatures, wear patterns, and lap times with surgical precision. This data became evidence but also a roadmap for future innovations. The suspension setup had to be adjusted to accommodate the oversized tires. The team modified spring rates, shock valving, and alignment specifications to maximize the advantage. This required extensive testing and development, all conducted in secret. They essentially developed 2 completely different setups, one for inspection with legal tires and one for racing with the oversized rubber. The logistics of switching tires without detection were complex. The team had to store the illegal tires separately, transport them discreetly, and mount them at exactly the right time to avoid scrutiny. This required coordination among multiple team members, any of whom could have exposed the scheme. The risk-reward calculation was fascinating. The team knew they would eventually get caught. NASCAR's inspections were becoming more thorough, and competitors were getting suspicious. But every race they ran with the advantage was potentially a win, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money and millions in sponsor value. The aftermath changed how teams approached risk. The penalty was severe enough to deter casual cheating, but not so harsh as to eliminate innovation entirely. Teams learned to pick their battles, to cheat smarter rather than harder. The oversized tire trick was too brazen for the new era, but it inspired subtler approaches. The technological arms race accelerated. If NASCAR was going to measure tires more carefully, teams would innovate elsewhere. The focus shifted to areas that were harder to inspect: engine internals, fuel chemistry, aerodynamic details that only showed up at speed. The game continued, just with different rules. The cultural impact on NASCAR was profound. The sport had always balanced its outlaw roots with corporate ambitions. The oversized tire scandal highlighted this tension perfectly. Fans loved the rebellious spirit, but sponsors demanded integrity. NASCAR had to navigate between authentic racing culture and commercial viability. Looking back, the oversized tire trick represents a pivotal moment in motorsports history. It was simultaneously the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The days of simple mechanical cheating were ending. The age of sophisticated, technology-driven innovation was beginning. The engineering elegance of adding 4 inches to tire circumference remains impressive. No computers, no advanced materials, no complex systems, just a fundamental understanding of physics and the courage to exploit it. In an age of increasing complexity, there's something beautiful about such simplicity. The competitive advantage those 4 inches provided was transformative. In qualifying, the extra grip could mean 2 or 3 grid positions. In race conditions, it meant the ability to run harder longer without degradation. In traffic, it provided the confidence to make aggressive moves. Every aspect of performance improved with those 4 inches. The detection story itself has become legendary. The inspector who finally caught the modification described measuring the tires 3 times, not believing the first 2 readings. The circumference was so consistently oversized that he initially thought his measuring equipment was faulty. Only after confirming with multiple tools did he realize he'd uncovered one of the most significant cheating scandals in NASCAR history. The penalty announcement sent shockwaves through the sport. $35,000 was more than some teams' entire annual budgets. 104 points was enough to drop a championship contender to mid-pack. NASCAR was sending a message. The era of blatant cheating was over. But the innovation never stopped. Within months, teams found new ways to push boundaries. They developed adjustable aerodynamic devices that would change shape at speed. They created brake cooling systems that doubled as downforce generators. They found ways to make cars faster while staying within the letter, if not the spirit, of the rules. The oversized tire trick also influenced how NASCAR wrote rules. Instead of saying tires must be a certain size, they began specifying exact part numbers, manufacturing dates, and serial numbers. The rulebook became less about principles and more about specifics, a direct result of the creativity teams showed in interpreting vague regulations. The human cost of the scandal is often forgotten. Crew members lost their jobs. Careers were derailed. Reputations were damaged. The mechanic who masterminded the scheme became both famous and infamous, celebrated in some circles and blacklisted in others. The personal consequences extended far beyond fines and points. Yet the respect for the innovation remained. Even NASCAR officials, privately, admitted admiration for the audacity and cleverness of the scheme. It represented everything they were trying to prevent, but also everything that made NASCAR exciting. The push and pull between innovation and regulation, between creativity and control. Today's NASCAR teams spend millions on computational fluid dynamics, wind tunnel testing, and 7-post rigs. They employ dozens of engineers with advanced degrees. They use simulation software that would have seemed like science fiction in 1983. But they're all chasing the same thing that mechanic was: an advantage, an edge, those crucial 4 inches that separate winning from losing. The oversized tire story reminds us that racing has always been about more than driving. It's about innovation, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of speed. It's about finding advantages where others see limitations. It's about pushing boundaries, sometimes past their breaking point. Modern tire technology has advanced far beyond what was available in 1983. Today's racing tires are precisely manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. They're designed with specific compounds for different tracks, different conditions, even different times of day. But the fundamental physics that made those oversized tires effective haven't changed. The grip equation remains the same. More contact patch equals more grip. Better heat management equals consistent performance. Optimal tire dimensions equal faster lap times. The mechanic who figured out how to add 4 inches to tire circumference understood these principles intuitively. The scandal also highlighted the importance of institutional knowledge in racing. The mechanic didn't develop this trick overnight. It came from years of experience, observation, and experimentation. He understood not just how tires worked, but how NASCAR worked, how inspections worked, how to exploit the gap between theory and practice. This kind of knowledge can't be taught in engineering school. It comes from turning wrenches, from watching tires wear, from understanding the subtle feedback drivers provide. It's the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical wisdom, and it's what separates great mechanics from good ones. The cultural mythology around the incident has grown over the decades. Every telling adds details, some true, some embellished. The 4 inches have become legendary, a symbol of NASCAR's wild early days, when creativity trumped compliance. It's a story told to rookies and repeated at reunions, part of the oral history that defines the sport. But beyond the mythology, the technical achievement remains impressive. Creating consistently oversized tires that could pass visual inspection, perform reliably in race conditions, and provide measurable advantage required significant expertise. This wasn't backyard modification. It was professional engineering applied to circumventing rules. The incident also demonstrated the importance of systematic cheating versus random rule-breaking. The oversized tires were part of a comprehensive approach to gaining advantage. Combined with the fuel additives, the aerodynamic modifications, and probably other tricks that were never discovered, they represented a philosophy of competition where everything was negotiable. This systematic approach influenced how future teams approached innovation. Rather than single modifications, they developed integrated systems of advantages. They learned to hide violations within legal modifications to create plausible deniability to make cheating indistinguishable from clever engineering. The arms race continues today, just with different weapons. Where once teams added 4 inches to tires, they now manipulate computational models to find aerodynamic advantages measured in thousandths of drag coefficient. Where once they hid fuel additives, they now develop proprietary lubricants that reduce friction by microscopic amounts. The game is the same, only the playing field has changed. The oversized tire scandal of 1983 remains a watershed moment in NASCAR history. It marked the end of mechanical innocence and the beginning of technological sophistication. It showed that simple solutions could be devastating and that innovation would always find a way. Most importantly, it proved that in racing, 4 inches can change everything. Looking back 40 years later, the audacity still impresses. In an era of increasing scrutiny and regulation, one mechanic decided that the best way to go faster was simply to make the tires bigger. And, for a brief, glorious moment, it worked perfectly. That's the beauty of racing innovation. Sometimes the simplest ideas are the most powerful. The legacy lives on in every garage, every engineering meeting, every rules discussion. When teams push boundaries today, they're following in the footsteps of that mechanic who dared to add 4 inches. When officials write regulations, they're trying to prevent the next version of that scheme. The dance between innovation and regulation continues, forever shaped by those oversized tires. What engineering marvel or racing scandal fascinates you the most? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on whether creative rule interpretation is cheating or just part of the game. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of automotive innovation, engineering brilliance, and the relentless pursuit of speed that defines motorsports.